So one of the questions I've probably gotten asked the most since I started YouTube and doing Naruto reviews is, will Jiraiya ever come back to life? Will we ever see Jiraiya again? I miss Jiraiya. And while I've constantly given people my reasoning as to why I don't personally believe he should come back, I understand why people want to see this character return. It's almost impossible not to love this character. The fact that he could go from being a wise sage to a low-life predator in like 5 seconds, and I mean, he is the reason why Naruto developed physically, mentally, spiritually, the way that he did. Without Jiraiya, Naruto would have never became the shinobi he became. I could even argue that he'd never have become the Hokage without Jiraiya. Before we get into all these hypotheticals and possibilities of whether or not Jiraiya could come back, because I believe, yes, it is possible he can come back. I don't believe the excuse that he sunk down to the bottom of the ocean floors is a good enough excuse to not ever have a character ever come back in the series, especially a universe where, I mean, we've seen really crazy things happen. We've seen century-old shinobi being revived, fighting alongside thousands of other shinobi that were revived with their personalities and powers and prime intact. We've seen experiments escaping laboratories, developing obsessions with clans that were decimated, developing unique abilities. I mean, these are things in the Naruto story that have made me feel like almost anything is possible. In fact, when we start getting to characters like Naruto, the Sage of the Six Paths, Madara Uchiha, again, a lot, and I mean a lot, is possible. And really the key to all of these possibilities, if you think about it, is Orochimaru, who at one point in time wasn't in the story because he was dead. Or at the very least, that's what we thought for a long time as this character was slowly making his return. Well, now this character is back. So almost anything can happen. Yes, Orochimaru can do pretty much anything. I mean, if you think about it, at the start of part 1, he was just trying to get a hold of that Sharingan, right? He wanted that young Uchiha body too. Well, if you look at what's going on right now in the series with all the different Shins, it feels like Orochimaru, if he really wants an Uchiha body with Uchiha abilities, he could pretty much get that. Even though I would love to see Jiraiya return, I am scared that they would never do the character justice. Why have Jiraiya return only for him to disappoint the fans? That is what I'm personally scared of, that his legacy will somewhat be shattered, because I'm not gonna lie, some of these Edo Tensei shinobi, I felt like some of them were demeaned because there was a time constraint and we had to get rid of these guys, and there were so many different shinobi we were fighting at the same time, so it kind of cheapens all of these different shinobi's lives. Why would you want Jiraiya to come back only for the experiences that we get with them to be cut short? And you know, granted, okay, maybe we could get some kind of a filler where Jiraiya comes back, you know, as a spirit, or maybe Orochimaru develops a more potent impure world resurrection that has less limitations and that can actually bring Jiraiya back permanently. Why would you want the potential for his character to basically be sidelined? Because we know the story has shifted focus completely onto the new generation. You know, Jiraiya was a type of shinobi that, even though he saw things realistically, like there's different villages, there's different borders, people are divided, people are separated based on where they come from, even though he understood that reality, he also understood that if you put everybody from every village into a room and you all had them suffer like migraines and stomach pains for like an hour and they felt like really bad, they'd forget about all that shit instantly. They would just look at each other as regular human beings. That's the kind of person Jiraiya was. He was a visionary. To bring him back, because you might see him every 3 chapters or 4 chapters, maybe speaking a little bit, maybe giving some advice, but where would he really be plugged into the story? So that's where I feel like if they were to bring Jiraiya back, maybe like a filler, maybe like 1 episode, maybe 1 jutsu that allows Jiraiya to come back for, you know, a specific amount of time. But you don't want this character to be used as a prop to quench your nostalgia sometimes, to be used as a prop to make some jokes here and there and then be shifted off aside. Things ended really seriously. If you actually saw the reactions of a lot of shinobi, including Tsunade, when Jiraiya died, it would really kill off some of that serious tone, right? You know, I mean, just imagine Jiraiya comes back and he's making these same, you know, childish, perverted jokes around Tsunade when we all remember Tsunade and Jiraiya's last interaction. How would it feel? It would feel awkward. So instead of wishing Jiraiya to come back, appreciate what he did, sending that code out to save the Hidden Leaf Village, ultimately developing the future Hokage. Appreciate that and cry about it. Listen, it's okay. You could cry about it. You could reminisce on that. You can love this character for who he was, but don't try and play with this character just to quench your nostalgia, and that's what I see a lot of the community doing. Now, for people saying it's impossible for him to come back, it's just not true, right? There is possibilities open for him to come back. In fact, Jiraiya was a part of the Edo Tensei conversation. Kabuto wanted all these strong pawns at his disposal, because these are all pawns, of course, right? They're under Kabuto's control, and Jiraiya was actually brought up. But the problem with Jiraiya is that his body was at the bottom of the ocean. It sunk all the way to the bottom, or at the very least, that's what they're hypothesizing, and the water pressure would be too great to retrieve DNA. Although Kabuto followed that up with the fact that his DNA could still exist on the weapons that were used to kill Jiraiya in that fight, right? The DNA is still on the 6 Paths of Pain's weapon, so he could just simply get, the DNA samples from there and then use the technique to revive Jiraiya. Now, Toby shut it all down for some reason. He said, don't push your luck, and then that sort of led Kabuto to say, like, oh, it's all right, I've got more than enough pawns. And then Jiraiya was never really brought up again in this discussion. I guess they simply had enough tools, and it would take a lot of effort, I guess, to, go through the process of collecting those samples and then reviving Jiraiya, right? They got cocky, that's what it is. But people are forgetting the fact that those weapons still exist, Orochimaru's still alive, most likely with samples of Jiraiya's DNA. I mean, he was, an ally of him for the longest time when they were younger, so he might have thought ahead and thought, like, maybe I could use this DNA in the future. Jiraiya is a very powerful shinobi. We know how Orochimaru is. He documents everything. He collects samples from everybody, right? And then when you talk about, like, for instance, the technology that's been developing recently in, the Hidden Leaf Village and even abroad across other lands, you'd think to yourself that even if the water pressure may have been too strong at a time for a regular human being to go down to the depths of the ocean floor, maybe now with this new technology that's popping up, they would be able to actually do that and, find Jiraiya's body, what's left of Jiraiya's body, of course, and even if there's not even that much left of Jiraiya's body, they'd still have the technology to extract DNA, and this is assuming, of course, that there would be a team assembled under the guise of, retrieve Jiraiya's body and let's get his DNA, which I don't see why there would be. What it really is, though, is that Kabuto had Madara on his side, he had Itachi on his side, so as powerful as the pervy say Jiraiya is, and it's never bad to have more powerful players on your side, gotta understand a guy like Kabuto, he felt like invincible at the time. He didn't really feel like he needed to go out of his way to revive Shisui and Jiraiya. That being said, guys, we have Orochimaru. He can do pretty much anything that he wants, and we've seen how far his research has progressed. And keep in mind, he's still being allowed to do research. He's still being allowed to do experiments. Whoever's doing that surveillance work sucks. That being said, let me know what you guys think about Jiraiya and his possible return. Would you like to see him return permanently and maybe even train Boruto? I don't know how I would feel about that. On one hand, okay, cool, maybe Boruto gets the Sage Mode, but it would just feel like they're undermining what he was. Again, he almost died in a way, because Kishimoto never does a death in Naruto without a meaning. He died to teach Naruto the pain of losing a loved one. You see, unlike Sasuke, Naruto really never knew that feeling because he never really had anybody to begin with. Sure, he developed friends along the way, but it's a little bit different, right? A lot of these friends were developed on his journey, and he never actually experienced that big tragedy, whereas Sasuke has. Now, me personally, I wouldn't mind seeing him return for one episode. The fanboy in me would absolutely love to see him return and, maybe speak with Naruto one last time, see how much he's grown, maybe actually get a fight between him, Orochimaru, again, that would be really sweet, or maybe him and another powerful shinobi, like maybe one mission or something like that. For some reason they're able to revive him for a certain set period of time. But as for a permanent return, no. Even though the possibilities are there, Orochimaru could pretty much do anything he wants. I feel as if we wouldn't cherish him the same way. It's the same thing with Asuma or any other character who actually died permanently, right? Even though some of them were brought back to life using the Edo Tensei. And I guess that's what people are talking about. Like, why wasn't he brought back during the war? The reasonings are kind of weak, right? They're weak for sure. But I sort of understand why he wasn't brought back, whether it be the Edo Tensei or permanently later on. Because let me tell you this right now, it could be Jiraiya in Kakashi's place. And how many of us are really thinking about Kakashi right now? Not very many, right? Whereas people still think about Jiraiya. I think that's not really the best, way to put it, because, everyone still loves Kakashi.